Hey, this is a reprise episode that I did a while ago with Ron Seggi. Ron had played in town for many, many years. He's been down in Florida for a number of years now, but more importantly, he is coming back to town to play at the Warner Theater on May 4th. So Saturday, May 4th, Ron Seggi's bringing his big band, and he does songs like from Ray Charles and Neil Diamond, Tony Orlando, Elvis, Bobby Darin, Roy Orbison, Frankie Valli, all that type of stuff. He sings along to all those types of artists. He's a great, great performer, and he is doing this for the benefit of the Paul Yockland Scholarship that is at Mercyhurst. So go check that out. The Warner Theater, May 4th at 7 p.m. Tickets are $35 and $45. And you can get those at erieevents.com. So here's the episode I did with Ron. All right, welcome to the Erie Music History Podcast. I'm Chip Shell, your host, and today is a special episode because I get to interview a guy who, for his job, interviews the biggest stars in movie and TV and music. In fact, he's done probably over 19,000 interviews over the past 33 years on his syndicated radio show, but he had his humble beginnings right here in little old Erie. And this is also where he started really kind of a side project, his music career. So with all of that, Ron Seggi, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Chip, thank you very much. This is a real treat. You know, they always say that you can never go home. And I had the pleasure last fall of doing a show at Waldameer.
Yeah.
And then in 2016, we were up there with my full orchestra at the Warner Theater doing a charity for the Shriners Hospital. And most recently, after 32 years, somebody actually picked up my radio show in Erie, which hasn't been on the air in Erie since I started this venture. So I guess you can go back home, and it's people like you that make it possible. And I'm very grateful for that.
Great, great. Yeah, I was going to say, you know, a lot of people remember you from your days as Ronnie G on WJET, but also from all of those charity events that you've done. You've always been involved with charity over the years, and you did that Paul Yockland one last year, like you said. Let me just run through a few bullet points to set the stage for some folks who may be listening that don't remember you. First of all, you're in Orlando, Florida. That's where you're the host of, is it the Ron Seggi Today Show, right?
Well, it's Ron Seggi Today. And the reason we call it that is that it makes it sound like it's current.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, because, and somebody actually from Erie made that suggestion for me to do that because it sounds like it's happening now.
All right. And you record at Universal Studios? Is that where your studio is?
I was at Universal for over 25 years.
Okay.
When I first came down here in November of 1990, I went to them with an idea, and I went to a network with an idea, and that was the week before Thanksgiving. And by New Year's Eve, we had premiered this show nationwide.
Yeah.
Now, it was funny. I owned a radio station a little bit south of Orlando, but I didn't come down here to run it. I had leased it to somebody, and I wanted to put all my emphasis on this radio show. So we did it at Universal Studios for over 25 years. Now, I didn't work for them, but I was one of their production companies that had space on the back lot. And I had my own studios, my own offices, but it lent itself to being able to be able to say that we're coming from Universal Studios. And of course, when you're coming, you know, into an arena of national dominance or presence, I should say, you need all of the name recognition you can get if you don't have it at that time. And we didn't. So we hung our hat on the Universal thing. And actually, I left by choice about 5 years ago to build a separate facility, actually in the back of my home, not connected to the house, but a separate building altogether, where I not only use it as a rehearsal studio for my concert series, but also as a radio studio. And of course, all of my neighbors think it's a man cave, which I shudder to think of that name, but you know, what are you going to do? But and as of today, there has never been a production company at Universal Studios, radio, television, or movies that has been on the back lot for as long as I was.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, you building your own radio station or studio is nothing new. You started it when you were 14 years old, living out of your parents' house there on Elmwood. I mean, you built your own studio. That experience then leads you to get a job as a real disc jockey at age, what, 14, 15? Is that
14,
right?
yes. It's funny. I was telling my wife, I said, I started in the basement of my home. Started in my home, and I've ended up in my
And you're
home.
back there.
Just one big circle. Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually, one of my brothers, and you knew his daughter, helped me build a little transmitter, and it broadcast on 2 or 3 block radius.
Yeah.
And but we had a real cool setup in my basement. I mean, this wasn't no rinky-dink deal. We
Yeah.
bought a console from the Erie Police Department that they had sold to some electronics store. And we had studios and newsrooms and remote broadcasts. And we had a schedule every night of the week, Saturday all day long. And it's funny because out of all the guys, neighbors and buddies that actually at one time or another passed through the basement to do the radio shows that I had going, all of them but one actually were in radio or have been in radio, and a couple of them are still in radio.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, when I was doing my research, I read this 1965 article about you building your radio station, and it said Ron's lifetime ambition was to be a disc jockey, and his dream was realized when WWGO gave him his first chance. He's got the enthusiasm to carry him far in the radio business. Now, at age 74 or whatever you are, I mean, you've been doing it all these years. You made a career out of it, and you started early.
Yeah, I did. I always tell the story, and I'm sure my family's really tired of listening to the story, but when I was about 7 years old, in fact, I was 7 years, my father, one Sunday afternoon, he says, "You want to do something?" Because my 2 older brothers are like 10 and 12 years older than me. So they were out, driving and stuff. And I think my mother was at some wedding shower. And I said, I'd like to go visit a radio station. So he took me over to WJET because he used to advertise on that. And he knew, and Myron Jones, who owned the station,
sure,
his parents lived one door away from me. So I would see them all the time, his parents and stuff.
Well, what did your dad do that he was advertising on WJT?
He had a home improvements company.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It was called back in the early start of stainless steel window company, but later on he changed it to Sam J. Seggi and Sons. And the sons that were in it was my 2 older brothers. I was never in that business.
It was on Peach Street, right?
On Peach Street, correct.
Yeah, gotcha.
And then I went in and I met Frank Martin on a Sunday afternoon.
Wow.
And I came home and I said, Dad, this is what I want to do. And of course, it's like kid 7 years old, you're going to be a fireman, you're going to be a policeman. I said, this is pretty cool. The way I figure it, you're pretty warm in the winter and you're pretty cool in the summer. It's not heavy lifting.
Right.
And, you're sitting there playing. You look like he's having a lot of fun. Years later, when Frank and I were very, very close, he used to always say, "Would you quit telling that story? Because you make me feel like I'm old." I said, "Frank, I mean it as a compliment to you. Okay, you actually gave somebody the ambition to be in this business.
That's right. Yeah.
And a couple months later, I went out to California to visit my aunts, and I ended up going to see at the El Capitan Theater, Tennis Ernie Ford doing an afternoon show. And then later on Thursday, that was a Monday through Friday show. And then on Thursday nights, he would do an hour show at the time was the new NBC studios in Burbank, which is where Carson did his show. And I was totally enamored. And of course, I was 7 years old. So you're supposed to be 11 to go into television. And so I couldn't understand why Ernie kept on looking at me in the balcony, because he probably figured, what's this guy doing here?
Yeah.
But between that visit to Jet and that experience of seeing how shows like Truth or Consequences and variety shows and stuff like that work, it was a no-brainer for me.
You had the bug. Yeah.
I had it.
So you go to Vincent and you graduate in 67, and then you go to Gannon and you graduate in 72. But in all this time, you're a DJ, you're working. But something clicks in you obviously during this time, and you say, "Hey, I don't just want to be a guy on the radio. I want to be performing." I mean, this is a podcast about musicians and performers. So how did Ronnie G go to be the Ron Seggi Show?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm going to go back a little bit even further than that, when I was in 10th and 11th grade.
Yeah.
Okay. And music has always been the catalyst for what I've done. Okay. Now, as you grow older and you own stations, you got to worry about engineering and sales and demographics and ratings and everything else. But the initial thing was the music. And I'm going to be sitting in this great studio talking. And when you're in 11th grade, Chip, and you got football players that, all the girls want to talk to, and you got basketball players that all the girls want to hang out with. Okay. when you're my size and not very athletic, and you can get on the radio at 11 o'clock in 11th grade and dedicate songs to girls that you want to go out with, you're the king. You can forget about the football star. You can they you know what? I beat them at their own game, you know. So I realized, and then what happened? You asked me how to transition. I really had no plans of being a singer. When I was younger, I told you about Ernie Ford and stuff, and I always like to put on shows and Project Kids. But I started sitting. When you're sitting in a radio studio for 6 hours at a time, and you're playing top 40, top 50 list of records, and you keep on hearing the same songs over and over and over. You know every drum lick, you know every guitar lick, you know everything. Okay, and I'm sitting there singing along, having a great time, enjoying what I do. But I started to sing along with it. But I said, and I was still going to college at the time, and I really didn't want to get involved with anything else, because going to college and working full time in broadcasting and making personal appearances and doing record hops and all the other things, I needed one more thing on my plate, like bowling head. But I went into a recording studio, and you probably remember this guy's name was Carl Hamby.
Yep, Carl.
The second floor or someplace on 8th Street.
Right. Yep.
He was like really
one of the earliest studios that folks recorded at.
Recorded 3 songs. I think one was Johnny Be Good. One was I Can't Help It If I'm Still in Love with You. And I don't remember the other one.
Okay.
And they were on acid, right?
Okay.
And I thought,
were there live musicians playing with you?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I had, again, I had recruited 4-man rhythm section. One was Art Phillips, you know.
Okay. I know the name, and he became your musical director, right?
He became my musical director, left me to go to the Letterman, then to Minnie Riperton, then to Barry Manilow.
Okay.
And now he has a very successful recording and publishing company in Australia. And he wrote me a song a couple of years ago, which is out. It's kind of a country song, but and he's going to be coming to visit me later this year from Australia.
And was he just did you know him from school or?
No, he actually was 5 years younger than me. Oh. He was a senior at Academy.
Okay.
He was a singer there, and there was a girl by the name of Wendy Whiteman who worked with me at the Waldemar, and she went to school with him. And then he had a cousin in Cleveland by the name of Dave Kane, and they knew, a bass player by the name of Yubamir Yurasevich. You know Louis?
No.
Okay.
What's his name? Louis?
Louis Yurasevich, but his real name is Yubamir Yurasevich.
Okay. All right.
Okay. And I said, we got to change that because I'll never remember that. And so we put together a 4-man rhythm section and these 2 backup singers. Our first gig was at the station restaurant.
Sure.
But we had gone in but that was after I was out of college. This was 72. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Well, we had recorded this song prior to that, and thinking that I'd maybe get it played on the air. Well, in subsequent songs that I released, they never played it on the air because the owner's attitude was that you have an edge. We have all these local bands coming in here that want to play it, and they're good.
Sure.
But, if I start playing your song, then everybody's going to be wanting to do it, and they're going to say you got the edge because you work here.
Well, did you write the song too, or did
I don't. And prior to being a singer, from the second grade for almost 12 years, I played trumpet.
Oh, okay. So
my 2 brothers had an orchestra. My one brother started off playing accordion. Now, the only reason he started accordion, he was my oldest brother, and we're Italian. And if you don't play an accordion, you're out of the will as the oldest brother.
That's how it works. Yeah.
That's how it works. Okay. So, but then he later played drums. My other brother has played every sax, alto, tenor, baritone, flute, clarinet.
Wow.
And he still plays.
Okay.
And my mother used to play piano, but she didn't play in the orchestra. And my dad he loved music, but he never played an instrument. So they talked me into playing a trumpet, which I didn't like. I do now, but I didn't like it. I wanted to play either guitar, drums, or piano. And if I would have played piano, I probably could have saved a ton of money on arrangements because I could have, kind of arranged them myself.
Right.
It's hard to be a singer and a trumpet. Herb Alpert did it, Louis Armstrong does it, but it's not really conducive to that.
Yep.
So I go out with, obviously know how to read music and stuff. So I go out and a guy I worked with at Jet at the time said, you got to go start singing because if you like it. And even Jet Radio at the time had a couple of contests where they had the Jet good guys sing a portion of a song I think it was a Christmas song. Maybe it was
Hmm.
a 12 Days of Christmas. And the guy that sang it the best, and the audience voted, would be the winner. And you get, if you voted for him, you get, a bunch of albums or something.
Sure.
So we had all the guys sing that. Well, the station manager says, this isn't really fair because, you can sing. And I said, what do you mean? I can't sing any better than Frank Martin or Johnny Holiday. What are you telling me? But so I got a little bit of encouragement from that way. And then, like the radio bug, when people start clapping and they come up to you afterwards and they say, we really enjoyed that, then you know what that's like.
Sure.
But Chip, one of the things that I've always said is that when I first started off, singing was not the strong point. My strong point is, very candidly speaking, is all my years of being in master of ceremonies.
Mm-hmm.
Because then a lot of bands would go up and they would sing one song. If you go see Barbra Streisand, it's one song after the other. I had an act. I worked the audience.
Yeah.
It's a show. So it's not just a bunch of songs segued together.
What was that the norm back then? It seems like I've heard, especially for lounge acts. I mean, the word act is in that sentence, I mean,
right.
It wasn't just, you were listening to the songs, there was a performance.
Yes.
And that was expected probably,
Mhm.
I imagine back then. Were you, so you start out in, what do you say, 72, 73,
Yeah, right.
Your first gig at the station. So how did it go? I mean, you remember your first gig?
Oh, I remember distinctly, because I got to tell you something. Not only was everybody that I worked with at the radio station there, but all my competitors were,
from other radio stations. Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Primarily to see me fall smack on my face. and that has nothing to do, and I'm not bitter about that,
Right.
But, I was doing well in the ratings and maybe a little heady at some point or another. So, they were ready for me to take a dip,
Sure.
And it didn't happen.
and you're only 23, 22 at the time, right?
Yeah, 22.
And so is the name of the band, what was it? Ron Seggi and?
We had a name for him. I don't remember what it was. I don't remember what it was because we've gone through a couple of metamorphoses with different bands. I don't remember what it was, Chip.
Okay.
But I didn't use my name in it. But I know we always joked around about having the girls called Ronettes, but that was me.
Yeah. Well, I know that, I did find, some ads and stuff of when you really start playing at the Holiday Inn.
Right.
And, it is then, Ron Seggi or the Ron Seggi show or whatever they call it. But you're at, they call it the Ron Seggi Star Singers and Recording Band.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah. And
for a while, it was the Ronnie G show because we wanted to capitalize.
Right. And I mean, you play at the Holiday Inn on 18th and State at that time was looking for a boost. They really needed something. And they had just opened French Kate's Red Slipper Saloon.
Right. You're good, Chip. You're good.
And you guys, you're the house band, basically, right? I mean, You're playing Wednesday through Saturday, right?
Yeah. What had happened was that was not at the time that we contracted to do that. It wasn't as big as it is. You have to understand, prior to us being there, I think it was Mary Alice Brown, a lovely organ player and singer. Right. And they actually extended it out so that we could be there. We were there for months.
You had
months,
how many people? 6? You had 2 backup singers?
I had 2 backup singers and a 4-man rhythm section. And then I had somebody that was a sound man, all around guy. So we had 8 people there.
That's a big deal.
That's
project.
A big deal.
Yeah.
And we had a big sign in the back that each letter was, it was like 4 feet high and had lights on. It was a major deal. And, but we also played places on the road. We played, as a result of that engagement, we played at the International Holiday Inn Convention in Memphis. And I'll never forget that. There was like 6,000 people there.
Wow.
And they had us staying out at a venue that they owned and brought us in on a helicopter and everything. I was like, we thought we were like in big time. Well, it was compared. But then we played, we did some shows on Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and the Cleveland television stations promoting the record. We go there in the morning and we pantomime the songs.
Okay.
And we did some other gigs, but those engagements in Erie were memorable because, your friends come and see you. It was tough though. You could appreciate this, Chip, because you couldn't just do like now. You could keep the same show for a while because you're going from different place to different place. But when you're at a place for that length of time, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And you didn't have time to rehearse.
Right. Well, I was going to ask you that. Yeah. I mean, with a band that size, where were you rehearsing?
Well, before we did a gig, we spent all of our rehearsal time. Fortunately, the family business facility on Peachtree that you and I talked about earlier was 8,000 square feet. So I went to my mother and I said, hey, you know what? Give me a break. give me 400 square feet of this thing.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, anything you want. My brothers weren't all that happy to be working on drums and pianos, but they were musicians too, so they understood.
I was going to say, did they ever say, hey, let us in too, or can we play along?
Well, my oldest brother, Guy, enjoyed it. My brother, Sam, that wasn't his bag. He liked the big bands, okay? I mean, sure. he liked, he just liked the bigger, the Glenn Millers and so. And believe me, I do too. That wasn't what was hot.
Sure. Exactly. Right at the time, because we're talking about the early 70s here.
Right.
And remind me and say it again. Who were all the people in the band, if you remember?
Okay. In my original band, and like I said, you know this, you have turnover. We had Wendy Whiteman and I'm very, very sorry, I don't remember the other girl's name.
I know.
On lead guitar, lead guitar was Art Phillips. He was the leader of the band. On piano was a fellow named Dave Kane from Cleveland. On bass from Erie was Louis Urasevich, but his real name was Yubomir Urasevich. He's now out in California. And on drums was Rick Cass, played for me for a long time, but that wasn't the drummer at the time. His name was Robert, and Chip, my memory's got me there.
That's all right. Once we post this, some people I'm sure will fill in the blanks for you. I mean, and like you said, every band goes through a lot of different transitions. I know Rick Cass. I know that I think Durf played bass with you for a little while.
Well, yeah. Then the next generation was Durf. He played bass and then later played keyboard for me.
Right.
Rick Cass, Steve Burchick was with him for a while. Bill Arnold, who by the way is in Florida and was at a venue that I played the next night. Chuck Leone,
right,
was playing keyboard. I know I'm going to miss people.
Joe Salarino eventually plays drums, right? Or no?
Joe, the only time I played with Joe was at the Rainbow Gardens thing.
Oh, right. When you come to town.
And I played with Richard Buckle one other time,
I was going to say, I thought Dickie was in there somewhere too.
Right. Yeah. So, and there was people that came and go, but those were the people that really made an impact. And then we started recording. We started recording at the first song I recorded, Chip, was in New York. It was at the same studios that were used by Jimi Hendrix. But we were recording some country stuff.
And this was at GP Records?
Yes.
The Glenn production?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So I was curious about that. Like, how did you end up going to New York? I mean, how do you even find that? You're from Erie. I mean, do you just know that that's a good recording studio because Jimmy recorded there? Or, I mean,
Glenn Productions was owned by a fellow by the name of, I'm having a heck of a time. We had a salesman at the radio station, Jet, that was a very close friend of mine.
Okay.
Vito was his name. And he had a brother that owned that record company. Okay. And I didn't have the means to get up there. And Jet Radio, Vito Arrigo, and his brother owned the record company. And so he told his brother about it. I didn't even have the means to get up there. It was in the 70s.
Yeah.
So Jet Radio had a contest among their disc jockeys. And the contest was whoever came up the highest in the ratings from the previous rating period would win a trip for two to New York City. Well, I won it, which didn't fly well with the other guy.
Yeah.
I was the snotty-nosed kid that used to go hang out at the radio station. And now I get this trip. I'm not married,
Right.
Everybody's got a wife and, and they we're going to go up there. I've been doing this for 100 years. Well, Ben Arrigo was the fellow's name.
Okay.
Vito's brother. And so I went up there. He had the record company and we got that studio. And then there was a great recording studio in Cleveland where we recorded some songs. And that studio was where we did it with actually members of the Cleveland Orchestra. And that studio was where Maureen McGovern from Youngstown had recorded The Morning After. And in fact, while we were doing our session, she was in another studio in the same complex doing another album.
Wow. And so when you're going into the studio, are you recording original songs that who has
Yes,
written?
yes.
Art has written them or other folks? Are
No,
they
the one in New York was written by a guy named Gary Zalameni,
okay?
and there was another name. He wrote some stuff for the Godfather theme, and he was from Ashtabula.
Okay.
The stuff that we did in Cleveland was also done by another writer. We did 3 or 4 songs up there.
And was it the
I,
same was the same thing like you knew them through the radio business and that's how
yes,
you got connected with them? Okay.
yes, that
Right.
is exactly.
So
In fact,
so
that studio was downstairs from a radio station that was a top radio station in Cleveland.
oh really?
That's how
Okay.
we knew that there was there.
Easy. Yeah, got it. So is the song Good Night that you're talking about that you're going to record, or is what songs are you
The
recording?
first
Because
songs
Good
we
Night
did
ends up
was
being the one that you get the Grammy or a
the
nomination
one
for.
it's kind of a funny thing. The I guess I normally don't explain this, and I want to do it now. Good Night Until Morning were written by Gary Zalameni out of Ashtabula. That's what we did in New York. Okay. Needless to say, I was scared out of my all right because I'm at radio and now and the woman said, "Oh, you sound like Neil Diamond." I think she was just saying that because she wanted the gig, but and actually, it was one of those songs, and I think it was Good Night, that was actually the nominated for the Grammy.
Mm-hmm.
And the flip side for nominated as a best for the best writer.
Okay,
That's why
gotcha.
Gary and I flew. We flew up to the Grammy Awards in New York. They were doing it on the West Coast and in the East Coast, in Los Angeles. And I was sitting at the table with Don McLean when he won that night for American Pie.
Wow.
I got a nice picture of my record company owner and me and Don, and he's holding all the awards, you know.
Wow.
So anyway, but when I did Give Me a Penny and Sing a Song, and another song that we did called Ezekiel, had a much wider spectrum. It a lot of horns, a lot of brass. That's when we used some of the Cleveland Orchestra band members, and that song, especially in the solos and the bridges, it had kind of a Chicago sound to it.
Okay.
And when I sing that one of those songs in my show, I kind of allude the fact that was the nominated for the Grammy song, but it really was the other one.
It was Good Night.
But I'm more proud of the ones we did in Cleveland because number one, I was a little bit more of a seasoned singer at that time, and the brass was just, you know, I said, let's just take my voice out and we'll just sell it as an instrumental. This doggone thing is really good, you know?
Yeah. I thought it was odd that when I read up about it, that Good Night was actually nominated as a country record. And I've never thought of you as a country singer.
Well, it's funny because Art Phillips, the song that he wrote for me, is a country song. And I tell you how we did it, Jim. He's an Australian. You always hear about how they do these duet albums. So he writes this song. And I like doing ballads, but I really like to do up tempos.
Yeah.
And so he said, I got this song for you. He wrote it, and a girl that used to write for Motown who lives in South Carolina wrote it. So he sends me the lyric, and I got a rough track, and I'm singing it to it in the studio, and I'm putting echo on it. So he, no, don't do any of that. Just make it a dead track, okay? So I did, and I sent it to him, and then he calls me up. This took 4 months, and stop here, he actually produced this thing on the phone. Okay. So then I send him that track again, and he gets the orchestra, he gets the backup singers, he does the mixing, and it's a country song. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
But he did a hell of a job with this song.
And you
can actually, if you do go on Alexa or something, if you look for Two Ends Against the Middle, check that out.
Okay.
And that's the song. Okay, it's on one of his albums, but and also when I was working with Ed McMahon one time, he said, I went on. He was my partner,
right?
When we were on a trip one time, he said, I went on eBay and I bought an album for him. What was it? And the album, I had it here, was from Brazil. And I said, why would you buy that? He says, look at the back of it. And on the back of it, of course, it lists the songs. One of the songs was a Drifter song. One of the songs was Hamilton, Joe, Frank, and Reynolds. Don't let whatever it was. Don't keep your love from you.
Sure.
And one was Give Me a Penny by me.
Huh.
And he says, you must be big in Brazil. That was the joke. I don't know how they got it.
I was going to say, how did they get it?
I don't know how they got
Yeah.
it. I don't even know what was on there.
Well, that's one of the things I was going to ask is, I mean, at this time you're recording 45s. I mean, right? I mean, there's no album like for that good night. You didn't even, release that publicly, right? I mean, there were very few of those made just for radio stations. Is that
Yes,
right?
that's correct.
I mean, those must be super collector's items. Did people ever contact you about those?
Oh, I see it on eBay.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, I see it on. Yeah, I see it on.
There couldn't have been that many that they pressed, right?
No, and ironically, the first things that they pressed, the first, I don't know, couple thousand.
Yeah.
They sent me like 20 of them or 50 of them. I said, this sounds terrible. Okay, it was a stereo track, and they were only picking up one side of it.
Oh,
They had printed like 3,000 or 4,000 of these things, and it was terrible, Chip. I mean, because it was like listening to a stereo station that was out of phase.
yeah.
The Mamas and the Papas, if you used to listen to it, you could hear drums on one side and the vocals on the other. But if you listen to one, you didn't hear the drums. And if you listen to the other one, you didn't hear the vocals. That's
Great.
what it sounded like. It was terrible.
And
God knows how many radio stations got that and said, I'm not going to air this thing.
Right. Yeah, I wondered, did they ever fix it?
Well, they re-released
it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that you had been played in where Buffalo, New York, Chicago, right? I mean, it was playing.
Yeah.
Did they play it much in Erie or no?
No, not at all.
No, yeah,
not at all.
Just because of who you were.
Just because of that, yeah.
Yeah.
Just because of that. When I owned WSEG, I had I was very conscientious in the beginning, even before I went into ownership of stations, of having friends of mine in the business, give you the business, okay? Because so one day I'm in my office at WSEG, and I had the speaker on the ceiling, and I'm kind of subliminally listening to it, but I'm doing some paperwork, and I'm listening to the radio station. All of a sudden, I hear the song "Good Night" come on, and I popped out of my seat, ran in the studio, and one of the disc jockeys found the record in some files that I had, and he thought it'd be funny to do that,
Yeah.
Now I could have turned, and he was. I feel bad now because he was very sincere. He thought he was doing me a favor, but the last thing I wanted to hear from some advertiser or some competitor is that he buys a radio station, he plays his own music.
Yeah, sure.
Take that damn thing off the air. And he said, well, I didn't mean to do that. I said, you don't understand the ramifications involved here.
Right.
So, but no, Erie didn't play it. But I used to do the intermissions, tape the intermissions for drive-in restaurants, drive-in theaters. Theaters. And I would play records, and I play my own records.
There you go. So it did get some exposure.
It got some airplay.
Yeah,
I don't think everybody was at the concession stand. Hot dog.
So you're not only recording. If you gave me a penny, I mean, did you eventually record an album, or was it all 45s?
It was all 45.
Okay, all right. I was going to say.
Now I have a CD out now, but I have a CD out now.
Okay, but that was much later.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was a couple of years ago.
Okay, all right, gotcha. And so, how many 45s are we talking? How many songs did you cut or release?
I think 6.
6. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Yeah. And did you like the recording aspect of things? I mean, I think of you as a performer, I mean, did you have any recording studio, memories where you're like, oh, this just got too repetitive or, boring or?
Recording is very laborious. I mean, it's like practicing for a play, and you're just doing it over and over and over.
Right.
Again. And I am one of these people that are highly critical of myself.
Oh,
I'm hard on myself.
Yeah.
And, like a lot of people say, geez, I heard that commercial was really good. And I'm thinking to myself, you got a dead ear. That's a lousy commercial. I'll do the thing over and over and over again. And at first, the process was fun.
Yeah.
But Chip, when you go through that phase of it, and then you go out and you have the excitement of a crowd right then and there, it's tough to go back in the studio because now that's boring.
Yeah.
For an example, I talk to a lot of people on my radio show that make movies. When you make a movie, the problem with, or a television, whether it's for TV or the big screen, the problem with that is not the immediate reaction. You make a movie today, and I interviewed a guy today that's making a movie. It'll be out in 2024. Okay. So the reactionary time of the performance is so delayed. And it's such a laborious thing. Now, there are a lot of singers and band people that like the intricacies, Ray Charles being one of them, of a studio environment. And that's where you become creative. But you know what? There's nothing like that applause and that instant, that instant gratification or an instant rejection, knowing that you're screwed up and that's not going to be accepted.
Right.
I like recording. When we go in and record, I like to do it, but I'm never satisfied. It's very frustrating.
So in 73, you and Claudia get married, right?
Yes.
And so you're still performing pretty regularly at the time?
Very regularly.
Yeah. What is your schedule like? You're on the radio in the mornings. What were you doing at the time?
Well, when I started singing, I was on when I really started singing, I was on in the evening, like 6 to 10.
I mean, your DJ job.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay.
Oh,
then I went to 5 to 9.
Okay.
So when I had to be at a place that had music from 9 to 1, the band would do a warm-up set, and then I would come in, make it change, and go on. Okay. So I was going in the radio station 3:30, 4 o'clock, on the air for 4 hours, and then doing 2 shows every night. Now, when I went to middays, 10 to 1, it was a little bit of an easy situation, but the next morning was brutal because I had to be back at the station at 9 o'clock in the morning. And not only, but I was young and it didn't bother me, but I was wearing my voice out. There were nights it was just, I don't care how old you are. I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
I was wearing my voice out, and but I didn't stop. That was not an excuse to stop.
Right. And Claudia was cool with, had she met you through singing?
No, I was doing. I have a lot of history with the Waldemar. When I was a kid, even working for Go Radio, I'd go to the Jet dances. Okay.
Yeah.
Then when I went to go work for Jet, I was one of the rotating disc jockeys at the Jet dance. And then Paul Nelson, who owned the place, came to me one day. Actually, he went to the owner of the station and says, I love all the other guys you got here. Okay. But Ron's the only one that's of age that knows what these kids are doing because, I'm 18 and they're 16,
Yeah.
So he said, I want to hear all the time, which again didn't fly good with the other guys, my cohorts, but that's what happened. Then when I bought WSEG, then he left Jet all completely. And then he and I were partners in the Thursday night dance. When I was a disc jockey, I met her there.
Okay.
Actually, I was coming in from vacation, probably talking too much, but I was coming in from vacation from Washington the year after my father had passed away. And it was my mother and I, because we had gone on a vacation there just to get her out. And I had to be back for the Thursday night dance at the Rainbow Gardens, the Jet dance. And, I got out and, went up on stage and did my thing. Well, as she dropped me off. I said, I'll get a ride home because I was late. She was driving out of Rainbow Gardens. If you remember Rainbow Gardens, a long road down.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
She saw the kids going up and stuff. So she pulled her car over and there was about 3 or 4 girls there. And she said, do you know who Ronnie G is? And of course they all said yes, because they were going to the dance. He said, well, I think he forgot, I'm his mother, and he forgot his sunglasses. And I don't know if he uses this for a prop or what, but he said, would you give it to him? And she hands it to this cute little blonde girl. And the cute little blonde girl comes up and gives it to me. And now the cute little blonde girl and I have been married for 300 years.
That's great. Well, that is worth the story. That's great. Yeah. I always like to ask about that because, at this point, you're not home that much, and it can be difficult. One of the things I was going to ask you is, during your shows, is everybody wearing uniforms, dressed the same? Because that was common back then in a lounge act.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. They do that white pants, white shirt, or black. I was the only guy that didn't. And again, my outfits on stage were icebreakers. In other words, I get a little flack from other people, but for the most part, a lot of the wardrobe that I used to wear then, my mother, who was in business, would stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning making these outfits that were unbelievable, knowing that she had to get up at 7:30 in the morning and go to her office and run a business.
Yeah,
she was in her early years. She was a seamstress, and you couldn't buy those kind of outfits. And the radio station liked it even when I was doing the dances, because their idea was everybody else at the station comes out, relatively conservative. And this disc jockey comes out and he looks like he's,
You looked like you were wearing an Elvis outfit in one of the pictures I saw.
Well, actually, to be very honest with you, I tell you what happened. I had been many occasions mistaken for an Elvis impersonator in the early years,
Mm-hmm.
and that was never intended. In fact, the day Elvis died, I stopped doing that in New York Heartbeat because all these impersonators. If you think back to those days, that jumpsuit in the 70s was very common. With the Osmonds had it.
Sure. Right.
John Davidson, Earth, Wind, and Fire. The high collar was also a style, Liberace and stuff like that.
Right.
And I had seen pictures of Elvis in that outfit, and I would, and I'd have those outfits made like that.
Yeah.
Then when I went to go see him for the first time, he walked out on stage, and I said, "Oh Jesus!" I said, "This is his moniker, okay?" But at that time, I had an attorney friend of mine at that time. He said, "I was just out in Vegas. I don't know. Elvis is stealing your ideas." And I said, "No, that's really not how it works." But yeah, they were very much like that.
Did you do a lot of Elvis songs as part of your show?
I did. I tell you what I did. I didn't do a lot of Elvis songs, but I did a lot of songs that Elvis did that weren't his songs. For example, Sweet Caroline, Walk a Mile in My Shoes, What Now My Love, all the songs. He did Tony Joe White's Polk Salad Annie on a very unique version of it.
Great song.
American Trilogy wasn't really a song. It was a song. It was 3 songs that were put together by Mickey Newberry, and he just gave it life with the big band arrangement.
Okay.
So that's what I did. I don't even remember. I may have done like Burnin' Love or something, but for the most part, it was songs that he recorded, but they weren't his song. Runaway by Del Shannon, I still do.
I was going to say, are there some songs that you still play that you played back then?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mac the Knife, I've been singing since 1910. I'd have to sing it twice a night, 2 shows, because I really want to hear that song. With it. You Lost That Love and Feeling. I'm just on the top of my head.
Sure.
Runaway. We do a rock and roll medley that includes all of the, Good Golly Miss Molly, Jailhouse Rock, Johnny Be Good.
Yeah.
But then we do a lot of Gene Pitney, which I'm a big admirer.
Okay.
Neil Diamond, of course, Solitary Man, Sweet Caroline, a lot of Bobby Darin, and Tony Orlando, of course, is a friend of mine.
Right.
And we do some country stuff. We did a couple of Mickey Gilley songs too.
You mentioned Tony Orlando and you mentioned Ed McMahon, and if you do any research on you, it's obvious. You've been rubbing elbows with these types of folks for many, many years, especially thanks to your radio show. But even back in Erie, we had mentioned earlier that I wrote the book about the Erie County Fieldhouse. You were rubbing elbows with Pat Boone at the Erie County Fieldhouse.
Well,
did you open up for them?
Chip, you are good. You are good. You are really, you're great. I was his opening act.
74. Yeah. How was that, Pat Boone?
And I got to tell you, I talk to him frequently. In fact, I think he's coming on my show again the week after next.
Okay? That's great.
Because I have a picture of him and I in the dressing room.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And he let me open for him. And I says, Pat, that is so a singer has a comedian has a singer. Okay. Yeah. But a male singer, especially one from your hometown, could really show up the act. Why would you do that? I mean, I'm grateful that you did, but
how did it even come about? I mean, how did you get asked?
There was a guy in brought him in town, and he had he owned a bar down by the Public Dock.
Okay.
The
Mermaid Inn.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Mermaid. Yeah. You don't know who I mean?
I gotcha.
Yeah. And crazy guy. And I don't know how he latched up. He said, I called him up and I said, I'd like to do, he knew who I was. And he said, well, I don't have, I said, I don't even care. I'll pay the band out of my own. I just want to do this warm-up act.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you, I don't know, $300 worth of tickets. You sell the tickets, whatever you sell, keep. I said, okay. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And I warned Pat when he came to town. He said, this guy's crazy. I mean, he's a nice guy. He's got a heart of gold, but he's crazy. So afterwards, of course, they always want to bring the talent to their restaurant. So he takes Pat down to Mermaid Inn. And I need to tell you, it was like
was a rough
brawl,
place. Yeah.
rough.
Right.
And
Yeah.
Pat's on stage and he's calling me, Ron, where's the car?
Yeah.
And I go backstage, I go back and he's sitting at a stainless steel table eating out of a paper plate cheese chips. And he says, why didn't you tell me this? I said, I did, but you think you're going to go at a 4-star restaurant.
That's right. Yeah.
That's how that came about.
Well, later on, I saw a picture of you with another Fieldhouse performer, Bobby Vinton, when he played there. Was that just a meet and greet type of thing, that picture that I saw, or did you play?
No, I emceed that show.
You emceed.
I emceed
Okay.
it.
Did
And
you MC a few shows there at the Fieldhouse?
Oh, yeah, I did a lot of them.
Oh, interesting.
Oh,
okay.
yeah, I did a lot of them there. I did a lot of them at Warner Theater. I did a lot of them at the Gannon. When I went to Gannon, I did the Rascals, Freddie and the Dreamers.
Okay.
A lot, Love and Spoonful. Yeah, a lot of Sly and the Family Stone, which was a disaster.
How was Bobby Vinton?
Well, Bobby and I have been friends since that picture was taken.
Okay. Interesting.
And very close. And he is not singing anymore. In fact, this month, next month, April, Bobby will turn, April. He will turn 87.
Wow.
88.
Okay. Yeah.
And he lives down in Florida. And when I used to go to Branson all the time. I worked with Ed in Branson. We also did our radio show. And we do it from the Bobby Vinton Theater and the Andy Williams Theater. And we were always, at Bobby's Theater, it was always, take my airfare, take my tickets, take my car. Very, very, very close to him and his entire family, his son, Chris, Jennifer, all of his children, Robbie, very close to Bobby. And I miss not seeing him. And in fact, I just got word the other day that we are, for the first time probably in 10 years, going back to Branson this November for their Veterans Day celebration to do our radio show and to also schedule performing there after the first of next year.
Oh, great. Yeah. Yeah. Because you've played there before.
Well, I've played there with Ed, but I didn't sing.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Okay.
All right.
When I played with Ed, I always tell people that I was Ed's Ed. In other words, he was the sidekick to Johnny and I was the sidekick to him. So I was his sidekick. But now we're going to go back and we're even thinking about maybe doing it at the Dick Clark Theater because our show is themed a tribute to Dick Clark's American Bandstand.
Yeah. Well, before we get to that, let me just touch on a few other things in the 70s. So you play for 2 weeks at Sardi's outside of Cleveland. I mean, that was a good place to play back then, I imagine.
Great.
I mean, Ciro's Supper Club, you're playing, these types of places. Then in 79, I have a note that says that you were singing with the Moonlighters here in town.
Yeah. 79.
Were you in the Moonlighters?
No, they were the band that backed me up.
Oh, they were the band that backed me up.
They were the band.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think it was Chuck, Bill Arnold, Rick Cass, and Dirk.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I was confused at that, because
that was the band that backed me up. Now they do it other gigs. That's the band that backed me up.
Sure. Yeah. They ended up going on and playing for many years. I've had Tim Popotnick on the band on the podcast before, and some other folks, like you said, Durf and Rick. Okay, so that's in the 70s. You open your own ad agency for a while, then you buy WSEG. You buy the old WMDI, which I can only imagine what it was like buying WMDI, truly the stoner station in town, and then, I mean, being like, we're going to convert this to top 40 or whatever. I mean, was there a lot of flack that you were getting at the time?
Well, it depends who you talk to. Obviously, there were a lot of disc jockeys at that station that were shell-shocked, and not many people at Edinburgh College that were pleased with it. Okay.
Sure.
But when I bought that station, I bought it 95% heart, 5% business set. Okay. Because it had absolutely no business, zero.
Yeah.
There was a couple of head shops on 8th Street that were buying some stuff. Probably was a trade, not to be facetious, but that's probably where we're at.
I gotcha.
Okay. And so I bought it and I moved it into Erie because what had happened is the fellow that put that thing up, that was an Erie station. He moved it to McCain because he had property there and lost the Erie market. Well, I found that out and I switched it back to an Erie station. But what I did was that for the first 2.5, 3 years, and this is where the heart thing comes into it, which, by the way, when you run a business with your heart, it's probably not the best way to do that. I obviously didn't want to play underground. That wasn't my deal.
Right.
And believe it or not, I had at the time a strong allegiance to the Jet Company, the broadcasting,
Sure.
because they had treated me well for many, many years.
Right.
So I didn't want to go head to head playing rock and roll music. All right. So I did kind of what we call a middle of the road, anywhere from Crystal Gale to Barry Manilow.
Okay.
With heavy on personality, made a mistake of putting sports on it in the afternoon, Pirates baseball on an FM station. That was a bad suggestion. And I was driving back from Youngstown one afternoon, visiting an advertising agency, and I'm on Route 19, and I'm listening to a rock station down there. And I pulled over to the side of the road. It was like a Friday. Pulled over the side of the road, and I listened for a second. Started the car back up, went back right back to my office, called a meeting, and they said, come Monday morning, we're rock. This is the business I know. This is the radio I know. This is the music I know. We changed our thing from WSEG FM, Stereo 102, to Red Hot 102. That's going to be our positioning statement. All this other garbage is going to be gone. And we're going back to Huey Lewis and the News. That's it. We're there. Okay.
Right.
And then with that move, I made a deal to go up to the Mill Creek Mall and be at the radio station in the Mill Creek Mall, which was a huge deal for
you
us.
Broadcast from there.
Yeah, we well, some of the day we broadcast.
Yeah, right.
Stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
But when I took over MDI, obviously there was a lot of people that had their nose on a joint, and rightfully so, because that market eventually flourished, that format, but
Indeed.
It wasn't at the time.
Right.
And the facility wasn't strong mechanically, electronically. It was not a strong signal.
Was it in the Baldwin building or?
No, MDI was in a little round house out in McCain.
Oh, okay. All right.
And the reason it was round, it was like an octagon, was because the guy owned it, worked at the Pinnacle, and he thought it'd be cool to do this. It was the most, it didn't even work as a dairy bar, okay? and he was never here, and it was running to the ground. I mean, you had a bunch of young teenagers running the place, and they're having a ball because this guy bought him a radio station.
Right.
But you could make a business out of it.
So let's fast forward then. So eventually, you leave Erie, and like you said, you buy a station in Florida. You guys move down there. Your show goes live New Year's Eve on 1990, and the rest is history. But you continue to play, you continue to perform, and like you said, it's right now it's a musical tribute to Dick Clark's American Bandstand. But for other years, it was not that, right? I mean, what was it? What was your?
Well, it was called Memories.
Okay.
Right. Las Vegas Myths. Okay. And one of the problems we had with that, obviously, is that people were coming out disappointed because they didn't have the girls with the feathers and the high hats, because they expected to see a Broadway music. And it's funny because when I left Erie, it was primarily because of the fact after selling the SEG, I had bought the following February the Florida station, and I had gone back and forth, and I said, this is great. But there was people in town, primarily my mother and my mother-in-law, who said, why are you going to Florida? Why don't you stay here? And I said, well, I can either go to Florida, Washington, which is another great spot for broadcasting, New York, too much snow, California, too far away. And Universal Studios was just billing itself as the Hollywood of the South. And I said, well, this is a good idea. But I came here and I talked to Disney. Disney said, we can't do nothing until March. Universal, I talked them into doing something within 2 weeks. Now, we do the show and we have no format. We don't know what, okay. It all turned around 4 months into it when Steve Allen came on it. And I said, we got to do the thing. But one day, I still wanted to sing, but I didn't know anybody. One day, one of the lawyers at Universal came into my studio and he saw the records on me. And he said, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a singer. He said, let's start a band. I said, oh, geez.
The lawyer.
The lawyer. Now, we ended up getting this band. Now, you'll like it. The band was called Men with Mortgages. Okay. These were the members of the band. There was 2 doctors, a college professor, a lawyer, an accountant, me, and a computer program. Okay.
Yeah.
And these guys had a ton of money. They're all doctors. So you want to, Shure SM58 wireless? Yeah. Boom, they buy it. You want this? Boom, they buy it. They had instruments like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
But they were lousy performers. Okay. They did all dance stuff. And I would go up, and this is the first time, Chip, that I was in a band. And I realized how tough it is.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't going to up the trumpet, and sometimes you're relegated to sing harmony. Well, for all the years that I did this, I sang lead. So when we're up there doing harmony, I'm singing lead, but I'm supposed to be singing harmony.
Yeah.
And they're getting all bent out of shape saying you're singing. I said, you guys don't understand this. Okay. I hear that. I hear the harmony, but I go to the lead.
Right.
And then I mentioned before about the camaraderie with the audience. By the time, they changed the guitar and tuned the bass, between every song, there was like a minute, and that drove me nuts. So I started talking. That song was #1 back in 1967, blah, blah, blah. And they said, you talk too much. I said, well, you guys are a bunch of yo-hos because, it's like, you're so boring. It takes you 20 minutes to get set up for the next tune,
Right.
So I left. I said, I don't. But that's where I got the bug to go back into it.
Okay.
But I didn't want to go back into the rhythm section. I figured, look, how many more times you got this? This is a big commitment. But that's when I put together a whole orchestra.
Yeah, I was going to say that. What do you have, like 15 people in your orchestra now?
Yeah.
And I mean, is that quite an ordeal? How often do you play these days?
Well, we're playing a lot now. We're playing every month places. On April 1st, I got a show at the Villages. And then in June 3rd, we've really got a great spot. We're playing at the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center in Orlando, the premier location in Orlando, where the Righteous Brothers have played, Frankie Valli has played. And we're doing that show on June 3rd. I'm real excited.
That's great. Well, I appreciate you chatting with me today about all this. This is great. I hope it was a good trip down memory lane for you.
I got to tell you something, Chip. It was an excellent trip down memory lane. I could talk to you for hours, and I apologize for talking so much. But I have to tell you, as an interviewer, a lot of interviewers don't like to be interviewed, okay? I find it fun to be interviewed because as what you're doing is, in my estimation, tougher because you have to keep the ball in the court.
Yeah.
And you've done a hell of a job of doing that. I mean that very sincerely. But as a interviewer, the best thing that you could find is somebody don't shut up like me.
That's
because right. I've had people that, I ask a question that's 20 minutes long and they say, yeah.
Yeah.
Those yes and those answers. I'm sure you run into that.
Yeah, occasionally you do. Yeah. But, I'm always wondering about how am I going to wrap it up? How am I going to end it? And for this one, I thought this would be a really good conclusion. In one of the articles that I read about you in July of 1973, this is a quote. This is what it says. So you were still brand new and, performing and everything. It says, Ron will be heading for national fame, at least in our opinion. We predict it won't be long before we are boasting that Ronnie G. Seggi came from Erie. And I got to say, I think everybody here in our hometown is proud of you. And I appreciate you talking with me today about everything.
Chip, I don't know what to say. Thank you so much. That is the kindest thing that I've heard.
Oh, good. Thanks.
I
buddy.
Appreciate that, Chip.
Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of the Erie Music History Podcast. I want to say thanks to the JPT Foundation. They have been a financial supporter of the podcast since the beginning. And they also give us a free space to have our monthly music night on the first Tuesday of the month. It always features our great house band, the Fabulous Leftovers, as well as a lot of other local bands and musicians. But it's a lot of fun. First Tuesday of the month, totally free. Any donations go to the Second Harvest Food Bank. It is BYOB. You can bring in alcohol, drinks, whatever you'd like. There's a great pizza shop next door, Pasalinqua's. There's a Subway in the plaza, so check that out the first Tuesday of the month. Also, make sure that you check out Jack Stevenson's Two-Man Happy Hour podcast. Basically tells you where people are playing today, where and when, and you can check that out at the #2manhappyhour.com. Check that out. All right, that's all I got for you. Thanks again for listening.